Pajanti Chadya Mavido Vipaschita Pajanti Chadyat Mavido Vipaschita Tatapi Mukyanti Tavaja Mayaya Tatapi Muyanti Tavaja Mayaya Suvishmitam Kacham Acham Nato Smitam Suvishmitam Krityam Ajam Nato Smitam I've got to excuse them. Can't say it. Vedanti Vishwan Kavayasmanash Varam Pashanti Chadyat Mavido Vipaschita Tatapi Muyanti Tavajyamayaya Suvishmitam Kritam Ajamnato Smitam Vedanti Vishwan Kavayasman Nashvaram Pajanti Chadyatma Vido Vipaschita Tatapi Muyanti Tavajyamayaya Suvishmitam Krityam Ajamnato Smitam Bolo
Vedanti Vishwam Kavayasmanaswaram Pashyanti Chadyat Vido Vipaschita Api Muyanti Tavajyamayaya Suvishmitam Krityam Ajamnato Smitam
Vedanti Vishwam Kavayasmanaswaram Pashyanti Chadyatma Vido Vipaschita Tatapi Muyanti Tavajyamayaya Suvishmitam Krityam Ajamnato Smitam
Suvishmitam Kritam Ajamnato Smitam Lady Vedanti Vishwam Kavayasmanaswaram Pashanti Shatma Avido Vipaschita Tatapi Muyanti Tavajyamayaya Suvishmitam Kritam Ajamnato Smitam Vedanti they say authoritatively Vishwam the entire material creation Kavaya great learned sages Sma certainly Nasvaram perishable Pajanti they see in trance Cha also and Yatmavida who have realized spiritual knowledge Vipaschita very learned scholars
very learned scholars,
tata api,
be
still,
still,
muyanti,
Riyanti,
become illusioned,
become illusions,
tava,
Tava,
your,
Yo,
aja,
Raja,
O unborn one,
Owen Roman,
mayaya,
Maya,
by the illusory energy,
Hare Illusory Energy,
suvishmita,
Suvitsvita,
most wonderful, krityam,
Krityam,
activity,
activity,
ajam,
Aja,
unto the supreme unborn one,
unto the Supreme Unborn,
nata asmi,
as me,
I offer my obeisances,
of my obeisances,
tam,
come
unto him.
unto him.
Translation: O unborn one, learned Vedic scholars who are advanced in spiritual knowledge certainly know that this material world is perishable, as do other logicians and philosophers. In trance, they realize the factual position of this world, and they preach the truth as well. Yet even they are sometimes bewildered by your illusory energy. This is your own wonderful pastime. Therefore, I can understand that your illusory energy is very wonderful, and I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. So please respond to me. O unborn one,
O unborn one,
learned Vedic scholars
learned Vedic scholars,
who are advanced in spiritual knowledge
who are advanced in spiritual knowledge,
certainly know that this material world
so we know that this material world
is perishable,
is perishable,
as do other logicians
as do other magicians
and philosophers.
and philosophers.
In trance, they realize the factual position of this world,
The factual position of this world,
and they preach the truth
and they preach the truth
as well.
as well.
Yet even they are sometimes bewildered
But even they are sometimes bewildered
by your illusory energy.
by your illusory energy.
This is your own wonderful pastime.
This is your own wonderful pastime.
Therefore, I can understand
I can understand
that your illusory energy
that your illusory energy
is very wonderful,
is very wonderful,
and I offer my respectful obeisances
and I offer my respectful obeisances
unto you. Does anyone remember a verse that's similar to this, which is glorifying the illusory energy of the Lord? It's in the second canto. Compares the illusory energy to the Lord's smile. So when you're attracted, if you see somebody and they're smiling, they look much more attractive when they're smiling. And that smile, that attractiveness that's there in the illusory energy is because of the smile of the Lord. So because we're all attracted to the illusion. There's so many different illusions, and that's the nature of illusion, is that it is attractive. That's how advertising works. You make some illusion about the product, and then people are attracted, and then they buy it, and it wasn't quite what they thought it was going to be. So that's the smile of the managing director of the company. But Krishna is the managing director of the material world. So that attractiveness is his smile. Put by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Not only does the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead act on the conditioned soul within this material world, but sometimes it also acts on the most advanced learned scholars who factually know the constitutional position of this material world through realization. As soon as someone thinks, I am this material body, aham mimati, and everything in relationship with this material body is mine, he is an illusion, moha. This illusion caused by the material energy acts especially on the conditioned souls, but it sometimes also acts on liberated souls as well. A liberated soul is a person who has sufficient knowledge of this material world and is therefore unattached to the bodily conception of life. But because of association with the modes of material nature for a very long time, even liberated souls sometimes become captivated by the illusory energy due to inattentiveness in the transcendental position. Therefore, Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:14, Mam eviye prapajanti mayam etam tarantite. Only those who surrender unto me can overcome the influence of the material energy. Therefore, no one should think of himself as a liberated person immune to the influence of Maya. Everyone should very cautiously execute devotional service by rigidly following regulative principles. Thus he will remain fixed at the lotus feet of the Lord. Otherwise, a little inattention will create havoc. We have already seen an example of this in the case of Maharaj Bharat. Maharaj Bharat was undoubtedly a great devotee. But because he turned his attention slightly toward a small deer, he had to suffer 2 more births, one as a deer and another is a Brahmin, Jad Bharat. Afterward, he was liberated and went back home, back to Godhead. The Lord is always prepared to excuse his devotee, but if a devotee takes advantage of the Lord's leniency and purposely commits mistakes again and again, the Lord will certainly punish him by letting him fall down into the clutches of the illusory energy. In other words, theoretical knowledge acquired by studying the Vedas is insufficient to protect one from the clutches of Maya. One must strongly adhere to the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service. Thus, one's position is secure. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranvelitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, unborn one, learned scholars who are advanced in spiritual knowledge certainly know that this material world is perishable. To other logicians. So this is prayers to Lord Shiva, isn't it? Lord Shiva. Logicians in trance, they realize the factual position and preach the truth, yet even they are sometimes bewildered. This is your wonderful pastime, and therefore your illusory energy is very wonderful, and I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. So it's an interesting glimpse into how a pure devotee sees the world around him. He sees Krishna, he sees God behind everything, and because it's the energy of God, then he marvels at how wonderful it has been created, and it gives a glimpse into what it must be like in the spiritual world where everything has come from. It's described that the material world is like a reflection of the banyan tree. And that reflection, so everything here in the material world is there in the spiritual world. There's grass, there's cows, there's blue skies, there's mums and dads, there's breakfast, there's work to do. That's because it's there in the spiritual world. If we don't accept there's a spiritual world and that this is a reflection of it, then everything becomes meaningless. We could just as easily have lunch at breakfast. We could have pink heads with the yellow dots on, and we could explode one day for no reason, all kinds of crazy things. There would be no rhyme or reason. One day the sun came round like this, the next day it was summer, the next day it was, of course it's a bit like that in Scotland, but everything becomes more and more discordant. So sometimes people, they complain that there can't be a God because this happened and that happened. But material energy is like the clock that's been made by God. And if somebody pushes a screwdriver into the face of the clock, then they can't complain that the clock doesn't seem to be on time anymore. So if you disrupt the mechanism, if you don't follow rigidly the regulations that have been prescribed for the human form of life, then you can't complain. You can't complain about cancer. You can't complain that Uncle Ted just got run over by a steamroller. You can't complain that your cat ate the guinea pig, because you messed up the system in the first place. So you can't break the clock and then say, well, obviously nobody made this because it doesn't work properly. If you follow nicely what the instructions are, and you keep the clock wound up nicely and oiled and cleaned, then it's easy to understand that this was made by a wonderful, intelligent person. So whatever you see, anything, a molecule, a drop of water, a blade of grass, the sun shining in the sky, everything is actually really amazing. It's really, and it's all very wonderful. And when you take out God and meaning, then everything becomes so dull. Well, it's just a ball of fire. We were told at school it's a bomb, it's a hydrogen bomb that just keeps going off. Which is really interesting, isn't it? Because if you blow something up, it doesn't keep blowing up for billions of years. It blows up. And because it's ignitable, then it blows up really fast, you know. You know, if I throw a ball of hydrogen into my log fire, it doesn't keep burning for a few hours. It just takes the wall of the house off. So how do you have something as volatile as an explosion continuing on in such a sustained way, in such an organized way, floating along, always at the same time? So these are all indications. And they say the rabbit on the moon is an indication that God has a sense of humor. Have you seen the rabbit on the moon? Okay, I don't know if I can show you because the moon's only half there now. But if I get a photo of the moon, I can show you. It's referred to as rabbit marked in Sanskrit. So it's like a little, just a little touch from Krishna. You know, like if you look in a painting, you're trying to see who signed it, and then oh look, there's a rabbit mark. Oh, that's Krishna. That's his playfulness. So Krishna is leaving little clues, but at the same time, he doesn't want to upset. You want to be a child, and you want to play on your own, and you want to try and be God. So he's like, okay, I'm backing off. Okay, I'm not going to be in the picture at all. I'll be here when you want me, but I'm backing right off. But at the same time, he just gives the kid some little clues that I am here, and I've got your back. Just turn to me, and I'll be right there for you. So when a person comes to the point of realizing, okay, this is the end of the road. If this is material life and there's no God, then there's no point to anything. Because if there is nothing after this, then what does it really matter whether you leave this world now or you leave this world in a trillion years? If there's nothing after all this, then nothing. There's no, you don't take any impression with you. You watch the program and then you switch the program off. End of program. And then back to the abyss, the oblivion, back into the oblivion where I came from, and none of this made any sense. So that really undermines the whole quality of life, because by nature, intuitively, we want to have meaning. We want to have some depth to our existence, not just, we just play around for a few days and then vanish into thin air. So we may theoretically accept now, okay, there must be something there because if there's not, then there's no point to anything. So I don't want to lead a pointless life. So let me pursue this initial premise. Well, there probably is something behind this, and I probably do live after this. I'm going to take that as my initial premise. So now you've started. It's like saying, take a test tube and take some potassium sulfate and some hydrochloric acid. So you go, okay. So you got all the ingredients and you've accepted that there's possibly something that could take place. And now you're going to engage in the process. And the process is to help you directly perceive the presence of God, not just see how wonderful his illusory energy is, but from that initial appreciation, then to go on now and think, okay, well, I would like to have an interaction. I'd like to have a personal exchange with this person who calls himself Krishna. Yesterday, somebody was saying, how come God is blue? Why is he blue? Could have just as easily been purple. But you could say that about anything. Why is the grass green? And the answer is, because it's green. You could say, well, why is God God? Because he's God. So you can't really ask why the sky is blue. I mean, the scientists will say because the grass has this and that and the next thing, but the grass could have easily had this thing and that thing in it, and it could have been purple, but it's not. The grass is always green. And the sky is always blue. And it seems really natural. When you go along in the countryside, you're not thinking, I wish the grass was purple. And I wish the sky was bright red. That'd be much more fun. No, it just feels right. So the more you get to know Krishna, the more you get to, wow, bluish skin, yellow dhoti, peacock feather, lotus eyes, beautiful cherub lips, plays the flute, dances in the forest with his girlfriends, herds cows. Okay, this is sounding more and more interesting, actually. I mean, who do you expect him to be? I remember when I first was a Bhakti, and I was thinking, what if he's actually a really ugly witch with a big wart on the end of his nose? And I was thinking, well, he'd probably be complimented anyway that I think he's really beautiful. But the fact is, he is the summum bonum of all form. And because I'm an artist, I was struggling a little bit with all the different paintings of Krishna. I was thinking, well, which one is actually Krishna, you know? Which is the actual one that looks like Krishna? And Bharadvaj asked Srila Prabhupada, which one is actually Krishna? And Prabhupada looked at him like he was crazy, and he said, they're all Krishna. Just like a diamond has many facets. So all these beautiful paintings of Krishna is the artist's endeavor to portray the supreme beautiful person. And they all give you a glimpse. And Krishna can at any time manifest, reciprocate through the deity or through the painting, even though that may be a different picture and that may be a different deity, and that one may look slightly different from that one, and this one might look different from that one. But when Krishna shows you he's there, then it's a via medium for you to perceive his presence. Any questions or comments? Yes, Pada Prabhu.
I just wondered from this verse what it means by pastime. Like talking about Krishna creating the illusory energy. Is it also considered a pastime of Krishna? And if so, then there's that verse from the Gita, is Karma Karma to meditate, and you just understand pastime and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
That's a nice question. Everyone get a question? It's saying that this is a wonderful pastime, and Pad is asking, well, is that the same as a pastime? Like if you understand Janma Karma, Chimedevyam, if you understand my birth and my karma, my activities, then you don't take birth again in the material world. So is this like a transcendental pastime? Is that what you're asking, yeah? Is it a transcendental pastime? Is it a transcendental pastime? Yes.
Because the Lord is transcendental, you can consider it a transcendental pastime, but it's in relationship with the creation. But it does, he enjoys, because it's kind of, it's so satisfied at Marama. So in that sense, it is his pleasure pastime. But it has the same effect as pastime in the Vrindavan.
Yeah. In fact, if you see this painting, you see the painting right at the very end where the four-arm form of the Lord Mahavishnu is lying in sleep. He's going into yoga and nidra, and he breathes, he exhales out, and all the universes go out, which takes about 3.5 billion years. And then he breathes in, and they all go back in. And while he's there, he's in asleep, and he's aware of everything going on in every universe, and he's making sure everything's happening. And so you could look at that from outside and say that's a wonderful pastime from that perspective. But if you were inside one of the universes on one of the little specks of matter flying around like planet Earth in a little city like Glasgow on that speck, and you were a little speck in that, then you may struggle with appreciating that it's transcendental and it's a wonderful pastime. And that's why the onus is on, well, if you want to see it that way, then you're going to have to change your consciousness. They say that the things you see, when you change when you change the way you see things, the things you see change. So you change your consciousness of how you see things. And as you become more Krishna conscious, then everything around you changes. Shishi Karnitai Maya Pashashi Ki. It's a nice question because we would like to harvest the benefits. The Bhagavatam is giving so many benedictions, listen to this pastime, this will happen to you, listen to that one, that will happen to you. And now it's giving us an appreciation of how we can come to the stage, achieve a level of consciousness where we can appreciate that this is a pastime, that the Lord is involved in everything that's going on, and he's arranging things to happen, and this person's getting his karma. So someone is born imperfectly, they may be deformed or impaired in some way, but they're perfectly and completely impaired or imperfect according to the karma that they've done. And you say, wow, what a wonderful arrangement by the Lord that everyone is perfectly getting exactly what they're due. And they have their lessons that they need to learn. So they're in that particular form of life, and they'll have a particular set of circumstances that they'll have to undergo. And that's to bring them to the point. Of course, they always have their choice, to the point of realizing, I don't belong here in the material world. I need to go back to my home where I belong. But you would have to be able to achieve that level of consciousness to appreciate that, you see. And Bhagavatam's training us to do that, to see the world in the right way, to develop the right attitude and the right paradigm. Two paradigms, the way things are and the way things should be. And it's not necessarily that our paradigms are correct, either of them. But the Bhagavatam is helping us to see the way things are and the way things should be. And it's showing us the method of how to achieve the way things should be. And it starts with ourselves. We're the person that has to change before anybody else. We're thinking, I'll change when everybody else changes. Or if they change, I'll change at the same time. No, you change. You just change. And then whatever else happens, if you change and you become fully Krishna conscious, then whatever else happens will be perfect and complete, because you'll have achieved the consciousness to appreciate everything is perfect, everything is complete. I had that interaction, this particular thing happened. Okay, so that was what I was supposed to learn. Okay, great. It's like tuning into the program. It's like being in a drama and then you finally get your lines and you know what you're supposed to say and what you're supposed to do. But a lot of people in the drama, they're not quite sure what they're supposed to be doing. If you ever do a drama sometimes and you lose the script and you're trying to organize, it's very difficult if nobody knows what they're supposed to be saying or doing, you know. Any other questions or comments?
Just in regard to the question Prabhu asked there,
Yeah.
and just looking at the thread that runs through the translation, it's talking about logicians and philosophers, like advanced practitioners, and even they are sometimes devoured by a reducing energy. This is your own wonderful path. So it's that bewilderment, it's the bewilderment which is Krishna's wonderful pastime. It's the fact that Krishna bewilders very advanced logicians and philosophers, and even Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. That's very wonderful.
Yeah.
And because you can understand, first the speaker can appreciate Krishna's interaction with his topmost devotees is wonderful. Mm-hmm. And because of that, you can also appreciate that everything about Krishna is very wonderful. Because the basic energy is also described as being, another personality. Yeah,
that's a nice point, because this really ties. The question really gets tied in now to the verse. You know, okay, you can say that energy is a wonderful pastime. Everyone's getting their karma, and then in due course they're reformed and they go back to where they belong. So that's wonderful. That's a great system in the prison, the cosmological prison that's been set up. So that's great. And then Jabber's saying also to tie that in with to go even further. Anybody that's directly involved with the law, if they go through something, like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Abhichat Sudaracharo, he says, my devotee may have some fall down, he may have some difficulties, do some abominable action, but still see him as saintly, because he's connected to me and he's coming back to me. So it's to safeguard, and this also is to safeguard. See it as a wonderful pastime. Don't deride the devotee. Oh, look, he's had some problem, and now he's got back up again, and he's continuing on, like Lord Brahma and these great personalities they have. They go through Jad Bharat, and we take that's to teach us. We don't look down on them in a derogatory way. We think, okay, that's a wonderful pastime of the Lord, you know. Bilvamangala Thakur, wonderful pastime. And then he realizes his constitutional position. He lives for hundreds of years and writes beautiful literatures. So it's a wonderful. But you could just be very derogatory and say, oh, look, he did this mistake and he made that mistake, you know. So helping us to appreciate devotees and to not look at the pockmarks on the moon. Pockmarks on the moon are there, but the moon itself gives off a very, beautiful effulgence. You could be like when I'm walking up in the morning. If it's a full moon, I don't need my torch. I could say, well, now I'm going to use my torch and I'm going to hold an umbrella so I'm in the shade, because I don't want to use that effulgence because there's pockmarks on the surface of the moon. So therefore I'm not going to. So the devotees are effulgent, illuminating like moons, and we take advantage of their association, and we benefit from their favor. And you wouldn't be able to access that resource unless you were able to appreciate things as being wonderful, wonderful pastimes. You could also argue that sometimes somebody on the path may fall due to his own bad behavior, or isn't intentional. I think Srila Prabhupada talks about that here, isn't it? He says that one shouldn't take advantage of the Lord's leniency. So there is a distinction. One could be seen as a transcendental pastime, and another one could be seen as taking advantage. So how would you discriminate between the two? Throw that back on everybody else. How would you distinguish? Oh, that's a wonderful pastime. Bilvamangal Thakur's done this, and look, but it was all to help us, teach us that we should be determined on the path, despite whatever obstacles. And then this person is taking advantage of the Lord's leniency.
I guess to some degree you could try and maintain a humble position where you see them as a wonderful pastime, not as a failure.
Yeah, that's a nice It's a safe. It says in the Upadeshamrita, Dristais from Bhava Janatev Apasasta Dosha, Na Prakritatami Bhakta Janashi Pajye, Ganganga Samna Kalabudba Defena Pankya Brahmadravatam Abhagachati Niradamai. Being situated in his original Krishna conscious position of pure devotee should not be seen, even if he has an infirm body, a deformed body, a bad complexion, then see all these impurities as like foam and bubbles. And still, one who's advanced in spiritual understanding will bathe in the Ganges without considering the condition of the water. So the Ganges is like the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is like the Ganges flowing from Lord Chaitanya's lotus feet. And in the Ganges, there are many bubbles and foam and mud, but we still bathe in it, and we see things as wonderful pastimes taking place, and that people are going through purification, going through some difficulty, and we just remain humble and respectful, and we still try to see the good. We try to encourage each other, and we try to help each other along the way. We're the well wishers of everybody, whether they are devotees or non-devotees, or even if they're out and out envious. Still, we're the well wishers of everyone in society.
So in Kali Yuga, because it's a 10th class of intelligence, you need a lot of examples of what not to do. And so it's almost like historically there is so many things that you learn. This is not the way to do it. It's not the way to go. Yeah. And in one sense, these people who didn't make mistake, we're grateful, to them that this is not the way to go. Like neglect your sadhana at the expense of sharing Krishna consciousness. Yeah. And all that become relaxed, distracted.
Yeah, that's why as this con goes on, as we get as we become more seasoned, and we have old wise monks walking around, they'll know all the slips and pitfalls of Maya, and they can help guide us through. So sometimes you learn through the school of hard knocks. So if someone's getting a hard knock, the best way to learn is to see somebody else get the hard knock. But if you don't learn by reading about hard knocks, by hearing about hard knocks, and by seeing people getting hard knocks, then you have to learn by getting the hard knocks yourself. But as you're getting the hard knocks and still getting up and continuing on, then other people are learning as well, who are a bit more intelligent, so that they don't have to go through it. And that's where we're failing, unfortunately, in human society now, is although we have a very elaborate educational system, the educational system is not teaching the student how to listen. It's not teaching the student to be humble, because unless that humility is there and that desire to listen is there, then we don't learn from the previous generation. We just start fresh. So we start with a fresh generation that don't know anything about war, and they think war's going to be cool. Oh, I'll be flying around shooting bombs and it'll be great, you know. But the previous generation would have said it's not. It's not. If we listen, then we don't want to have war again, you see. And then the next generation have heard from the previous one, who heard from their previous generation, and then they know not to make those mistakes. Plus, they start to do good things as well, you see. That's how society is supposed to progress. But if you look, like I'm not saying, if you look in the history, it's just the same mistakes. Build up an empire, smash it down, build up an empire, smash it down, building up an empire, smash it down. It's all, if you look at the history, it's all people pushing into other people's, pushing into their gardens and stabbing them with a spear and taking over their rose bushes. That's all it is, it's like, and then the next minute, these are my rose bushes, and he lives there for 10 years, and then the next minute, the wall goes down into a tank. He gets his head blown off. No, they're mine. In fact, there's no rose bushes left because he's blown the rose bushes up while he was knocking the wall down. He ended up with nothing to even take over. You drop a nuclear bomb, you can't go back for 50,000 years. Nobody wins. It's just. So if we can learn to listen and hear, then we can learn so much from the older generations, and especially older generations of devotees. We can learn so much. Advaita Maharaj was saying, what we need in ISKCON is more grannies. Because the granny, she's been through the whole thing, she's been in the Grihastha ashram, she's raised the kids, she's come out the other end, she's still got her bead bag on. She didn't get it blown away. She's still hanging in there, so she can really guide. And it's that type of guidance for the young married couples. The grannies can really help them, more than the sannyasis. Time for another one. Javi, can you just squeeze it out? He's quick on it. Took the corner wide. Coming in with a question.
I think a couple of weeks ago when you were giving class, you were talking about the state of yugas and kalpas, then all their problems are just like blips. They're just like over shoulders, and tragedies and crises are just like that. But then you also said that when we're actually really trying to connect with Krishna and Srila Prabhupada through the holy name, then we enter into a kind of timeless zone where the relationship, because the spiritual relationship transcends time. But I was wondering whether that's actually, and certainly I found that really helpful to appreciate that. But at the same time, Krishna does say, when the Brahma Samhita says that Krishna is in every atom, and because Krishna himself is present in every atom, then is it not the case that Krishna, it's just as that Krishna's interaction on the micro level is just as significant as his interaction on the macro level?
Well, it's funny you should say that. I thought when through my very attentive chat this morning, is because the spiritual energy is unlimited and the material energy is limited, then the spiritual world is not limited in terms of how big it can be and how small it can be, which is the same with time as well. I remember reading a book once, and he was waiting to get executed, and he was a priest that kept drinking all the time, and then he got caught, and he was going to get. And it was going to be the next day, different thoughts running through his mind, whether there really is a God, and probably God will be angry with him because he'd been a fallen priest, and then he was thinking, well, at least it'll be quick. And then he was thinking, well, maybe it won't be quick. Maybe the bullet will come, and it will take 50,000 years to penetrate my skull. From my perspective. So everything is very lucid when the spiritual energy gets involved, and it's no longer under the jurisdiction of restraint in terms of dimension, whether it's length, breadth, time, weight. Something can feel very light, something can feel very heavy. All these things can just change because the spiritual energy is not in any way restricted. So it's it's an amazing dynamic that we can connect to that. We can experience it to some degree, and the more we become absorbed especially chanting Hare Krishna, I've found, and also Kirtan as well, you feel yourself transcending time, and the time it seems to go so fast, and at the same time, it seems there seems to be a lot that takes place as well. So then we're contradicting our normal experience of the material world. Of course, it's not really the material world anymore. We're being released from the restrictions of the material world. Like if you're in prison and you're in a straitjacket, you're very constrained. But if you show good behavior, then they take the straitjacket off you, and then eventually they even have you maybe out in the garden doing things there because they realize, okay, he's going to be a good boy. So when your consciousness becomes more elevated, then you're no longer constrained in the same way by the material energy. And then you get a glimpse, wow, what it must be like. Can you imagine what the feeling must be like to be aware that you're eternal? How that must feel. That you never didn't exist, nor will you ever not exist. You always have and you always will be. What that must feel like to get in that space. Yeah.
I just have a quick question. It might sound like a silly question, but we're just tiny blobs. Like, why does Krishna care about? Yeah.
It's interesting because we find out how to accept that Krishna has form. He has a yellow dhoti, that he has bluish skin, that he's a person, that he loves everybody, and that everyone is important to him. He values everybody. And so that's why it's important that we hear about Krishna, we hear his pastimes, because when you hear his pastimes, then you start to get a glimpse. And especially Radharani, she's very, this is the month of Radharani, and she's the compassion of Krishna. And the stories of Radharani, she was very upset because some boys were hitting this hyena with sticks that were on fire. And the hyena was howling and howling, and it went into a little hole to hide where all its body was burnt, And Radharani said to Lalita, what's going on? So she went to find out, and they chased the boys away. And then they brought the hyena, and she was petting the hyena, The hyena was in ecstasy that Radharani was looking after. And then we hear about the stories of Rupa Goswami and Radharani holding a sari over him, or Sanatan Goswami, I think it was Rupa Goswami, was holding the sari because this heat was scorching and she didn't want him, so she was prepared to stand in the scorching heat and hold the sari to protect their devotee. So it gives you a glimpse. For someone that's unlimited and completely unrestricted, I mean, we're a tiny infinitesimal part, but for something that's infinitesimally, unlimitedly, he has unlimited resource to reciprocate with the living entity. In fact, more than anyone else, because you could think, well, how can Krishna love me? I'm just a little blob, and he's probably got people that are much nicer than me. So I'll just have another little blob, and we'll love each other, and we'll just be we'll be in blob, Mr. and Mrs. Blob. We'll have little blobby kids, and they'll drop little blobs everywhere, and we'll have a blobby life, But how much can you love somebody? I mean, generally people are only lovable for maybe 10 or 20 years, and then they start going saggy and wrinkly, and, who loves I mean, maybe 30, 40 years, but imagine having a loving relationship with someone that's lasted for trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and zillions and billions and willions of years, and it just gets better all the time. How deep that must be, And Krishna's missing us, but we're not missing him because we don't know what we're missing out on. But he knows how much he loves us and how beautiful we are because he created us in the first place. So there's no souls that he creates anything. So they're smelly, blobby ones. I'm not bothered if I never see them again, because everything that comes out is perfect and complete, whether you're a flower or a tree or a bird. He loves everybody. Everyone is very, very dear to him. So that's what we're missing out on right now because we have amnesia. And as we revive our memory, we also revive our awareness of how much Krishna loves us. And then automatically we love him, When you realize how much someone loves you, you automatically love them. Because, the nature of selfishness is, if someone really loves you, you think, oh, that's so nice because I really love me as well. So he's got really good taste. So you think, wow, well, the thing I love about you the most is how much you love me. And Krishna loves us more than anybody, because he has unrestricted ability to do that more than anyone. He has such a heightened ability to love things that we can like, oh, I really love that ice cream I had last week. Oh, it's great. You wouldn't throw yourself under a car for it, right? What we call love and appreciation is really, really scanty, very, very shallow compared to Krishna. You know how we can really absorb and appreciate things. And all we have to do is get in front of him, get his glance. That's why we have the deities. We stand in front of the deities. We may not be able to see the deities, but we're hoping the deities will see us, so we can feel their loving glance. It was so nice having Kripa Mahaprabhu here, because you can see when a person is very elevated spiritually, he has such an amazing ability to appreciate. And then you start to see the devotees through his eyes, and you think, oh, he's giving him a hug. I didn't realize he was that nice. And then you think, actually, he is quite nice, really. But because he has that developed consciousness, and that's a pure devotee. That's a jiva. Krishna's way. He's just like on another completely turbocharged ability to love. We just have to. As soon as Krishna notices and sees us, immediately he's like, oh, it's my peacock. I haven't seen him for trillions of years. One time Srila Prabhupada was giving a class, and he said that to it. He told the devotee who he was in the spiritual world. The devotee was like, so Prabhupada could see, So imagine what Krishna must be like. Krishna doesn't just know who you are. He designed you in the first place. When you find something, even if it's a little drawing that you did when you were 3 years old that wasn't very good, but it was you that did it, you're like, oh wow, I remember when I drew that. That's amazing, So Krishna's like that with us. Oh, I remember you. Okay, I've got big plans for you, I didn't just design you like that for no reason, He knows exactly what it is, what our potential is as well. And Gop Kumar went through all the coverings of the universe. It was only when he was back with Krishna that he was satisfied. And Krishna knew that. He took him through all these different situations. So it was a wonderful pastime for us now to reflect on how determined, how many sankalpas he made to eventually achieve that. And when Krishna finally saw him, he lost consciousness because he was so pleased to see him. And Gop Kumar lost consciousness, so they were arm in arm, completely out, out for the count, out cold. And then they both came round, and Krishna said to him, why did you take so long? So that's how much Krishna loves us, because he's missing us, but we can't remember anything, so we don't know what we're missing. ISKCON Govinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaura Premanandi, Haribol.